Hello and welcome to the Fauxworthy Podcast, episode number 6. I'm here with my friend Taylor Gaines, who is now writing for GainesvilleScene.com. He's a TV columnist there now, a new gig for him, so hopefully you'll check that out. I'll link to it on the blog when I post this episode. Today we're going to talk real quick about the Emmys. We're going to try to keep it nice and short and just kind of talk about our overall thoughts. I actually, to be full disclosure, I didn't actually watch the ceremony. I followed along on Twitter, and then I watched like the last 30 to 40 minutes of it, just enough to see John Hamm win and Viola Davis win and the Best Comedy, Best Drama Series win. So Taylor, I'll shoot it to you. What were your overall thoughts on like the ceremony itself?
I thought it was good. It's definitely the awards ceremony that seems to have figured out how to run efficiently out of the ones that I watch, at least. Because the Oscars is so bloated and long, and it ends up being like 1 or 2 in the morning, and you're just like, How is this still going on? Or I was shocked to look at the clock and see it was 10:58 when this one was over.
Yeah, we should mention that they came in on time. No, they did not go over. This year's host was Andy Samberg, whom I'm not a huge fan necessarily, but I do really enjoy Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and I think he's good on that show. So, what did you think about like what he brought to the table as far as hosting? Because people seem to really like him from the reactions that I got online and etc.
Yeah, I thought he did as good as any host can do on one of those things. I mean, you're so limited in the jokes they'll actually let you tell because it's so censored and I don't know. Mm-hmm. Is political the right word? I don't like.
Yeah, it's either they let somebody kind of do. I mean, this is a little bit different, but like when Ricky Gervais did the Golden Globes, people were offended. When Seth MacFarlane did the Oscars, people were offended. So it's either they let somebody kind of take the reins and do what is in their style, and it offends people, and that's just a risk that they take. Or they just like get somebody that everybody kind of likes and who's kind of nice and genial and let them just do completely safe, harmless, inoffensive jokes. And I think that may be the route that they took this year.
Yeah, it was funny. Like we didn't get a 7 Days in Hell Andy Samberg performance or anything, but he had some funny bits. Did we get a digital short out of him? I don't remember. I think we got that bit at the beginning about how there are too many TV shows, which I think...
Was that a musical segment? Was it like a big musical opening number?
Yeah.
Because I heard people talking about it. I admit that I haven't watched it yet. I'm still catching up from things.
It was an Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt style musical number where he goes into a bunker and watches every TV show and then comes back out and talks about all the TV shows that he watched, which is impossible. I was just... It's funny because there is just so much TV, but it definitely is unrealistic to think that one person could watch everything.
Especially this year with over 400 shows. I mean, you'd have to do literally nothing else. You probably wouldn't sleep. You would just constantly be watching.
The funniest bit of it, I think, was when he came out of the bunker and was running around the street saying how he watched every show, and then actors would come up and ask if they watched their show, and he would say, yeah, of course. And then the guy from Castle came up. I forget that guy's name.
Nathan Fillion. Yeah, who's always game for stuff.
He comes up and he's like, Did you watch Castle? And Samberg's like, and then it says 121 hours later, and he comes back out and he's like, no, I've watched every show.
That's really funny, actually. So, I'll have to check that out.
It is funny.
I saw like I think one little bit of it. Did him and Will Forte do like a Les Mis joke?
Yes.
In that segment, yeah, because I saw a post about that, and I that made me kind of interested in checking it out.
But he was good, and then it was really efficient. They played a lot of people off during their speeches.
Really? No wonder they stayed on time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every person that went up there pretty much got played off at some point.
Now, let me ask you. I mean, we talked a little bit about this at the end of our podcast last week. What is your relationship to the Emmys? I mean, when you really started caring a lot about TV, did you find them interesting? Do you have a history of like watching them, or are you more curious but don't really think they matter? Or
well, I'd say I've only really been interested in TV for a few years, so I've really only watched the Emmys the last 2 or 3 years, probably. I know last year was the first time I really intentionally tried to watch them.
Right.
I think I have a weird relationship with award shows in general because
I think most people do at this point.
well, yeah, just because the idea, and this isn't going to be an original idea, but the idea of awarding art for being better than other art when everything has its own kind of value is kind of just odd. Especially, and I know they changed the voting system for the Emmys this year. I don't know if you're super understanding of how it works.
It's incredibly complicated. They changed the voting system, and we should definitely make note of this because I'm finding it baffling. Basically, if you're a half-hour TV show, no matter what it is, like Transparent to me is not a comedy, but it's a half-hour show, so it's eligible in the comedy category. And if you're at an hour-long program, you are considered a drama. That was a new rule this year, and it kind of threw, I think, a wrench into the way people normally think about a lot of these shows. And it's strange. I looked this up a few weeks ago because I was curious, and I didn't really get a definitive answer, but if you're interested in being nominated for an Emmy, whoever you are, whether you're an actor, a writer, or whatever, you submit your own work, and you pick a specific episode, and you say, this episode is my submission for whatever category you're going for. So the performers and the directors and the producers at the production company themselves probably, I'm assuming, for like, if you're going for like Best Drama Series, I'm assuming the producers submit, here's what we want you to consider. So it's a very convoluted and kind of strange process, but...
And it's bizarre because the Game of Thrones episode, well, one of the 2 Game of Thrones episodes that got nominated for Best Directing was the one with the rape scene at the end that everyone flipped out about.
I didn't realize that.
Like,
but it didn't win, right? Who won directing for drama?
Finale, I think the finale of Game of Thrones won.
The finale of season 5 won.
And the craziest thing is the best directed episode was neither of those.
It was this episode Hard Home, right? Yeah. Where there was like a big battle that was like incredibly well staged at the end. That was the Miguel Sapochnik one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
but
just
that's so strange because that was a critically acclaimed episode. I remember, I don't even watch Game of Thrones, and everyone was losing their minds over that episode. And that was, for whatever reason, was not the episode that they submitted for consideration in the directing category.
Yeah, the finale also won for Best Writing.
For writing for a drama series. So it won 2, and then it won, Peter Dinklage won again, right? And then it won Best Drama Series. Now, do you happen to know if when you're submitting for Best Comedy or Best Drama Series that you give them one specific episode to look at? Or does it just the show as a whole? I wonder how that works.
This is going to be wrong.
Differently.
For series? I feel like for series it's the whole thing. My understanding...
It's just based on the whole season, maybe, of whatever year they're going for?
That's my understanding of it. I also thought, like, even the ones where you see them nominated for a specific episode, my understanding was that they're nominated for their entire performance, but then they submit one episode. But that doesn't make sense, so that might not be right. Yeah. It's a very confusing and weird... plus they changed it. I think it's more of an honor system now as far as how many screeners voters actually watch. Like, they changed that around, so I remember seeing that it's more populist was, like, a word that was thrown around.
Interesting.
Which is why people thought, Game of Thrones might win. Overall.
So I guess let's just go right to I guess our more positive thoughts about it. I mean, it is always strange, like these award shows, especially every year. It seems like, apparently for the Emmys, this was the weakest year they've ever had in terms of ratings. In the history of the Emmys, apparently this was the least watched telecast that they've done.
It's fitting if you think about it, because this is the year where there has been the most good TV.
Right.
And
so
it's
I almost
just ironic.
wonder if...
It's ironic that people weren't watching because they were potentially watching something else. I mean, Fear the Walking Dead was on at the same time, I believe.
And Project Greenlight was on HBO. There's, I just find award shows fascinating. I don't necessarily care that much. I do think that it's an interesting thing. This is something in the past few years that I've come to sort of... It's sort of just a marker of popular culture. It almost just kind of keeps a record in history of, like, maybe not even necessarily things that were good, but things that were popular that people were at least talking about.
But, like, are people really talking about Downton Abbey still? Or... I
mean, Downton Abbey has its very avid fans. I mean, this is going to be the final season. There's a season that's going to air in January. I guess it's already probably starting to air soon in the UK, but this is the final season. People that like it really like it. But that's the thing is, there's something that we've talked about this a couple times before, like, there's so much just diversity of content, and there's so much variety that there's always something for everyone. I don't watch it just because there's too many episodes. I heard those first few seasons were really entertaining, even if you weren't necessarily that interested in the time period. They were just a great ensemble cast.
I mean, you talked about the oddness of the categorization this year.
Yeah,
but the comedy category
is incredibly strong.
Got to be one of the best ever.
Which I mentioned last week.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, it doesn't really bother me that much, but I definitely would not. I would not try to convince anyone that Transparent is a comedy. It has comedic moments that are meant to be funny, but it's definitely a serious, emotional family drama. And there are funny moments, but it's not a comedy, and it was nominated in Outstanding Comedy Series, which arguably could stand atop the list. I was happy that Veep won, because I think Veep is a really funny show. And
so overall, though, what were you most excited about from the winners, or from
the actual winners? See, okay, so getting to the things that I thought, I mean... I was happy with the Veep wins, because that's a show that I watched recently and I really enjoyed. Tony Hale is really funny. He won for that. Julia Louis-Dreyfus has won. I guess this year was her 6th Emmy win, which I didn't realize, because she's won for Seinfeld and other things back in the day. And then it won for Best Comedy Series, and I think Best Writing also. So I think at least 4. And that, I was fine with that. I mean, I wasn't, like, over the moon about it, but I think Veep is a good show, and I like it a lot, so that felt justified to me.
The funny thing I thought was, it felt like Veep winning Best Comedy Series was almost inevitable, but then I looked back at the previous winners and saw Modern Family has won the past 5 years. Like, the last time a show...
Did it win last year, too?
Yeah, it won... every year since 2009, I believe. And the last show that won before it was like... Shit, I don't remember. But yeah, like I'll have to just come back in here in a second with actually sounding like I knew who the winner was. But I know that I didn't remember.
So Modern Family had like a 5-year winning streak, and then before that was 30 Rock?
Yeah, so I don't even know what I should say. Like, the crazy thing is, Modern Family had won every year for the last 5 years. The last show that wasn't Modern Family that won Best Comedy Series was 30 Rock, which was 2009. So, like, as much as I felt like Veep was going to win, it actually is kind of crazy that Modern Family finally lost something.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the one head scratcher. I don't actually watch the show. I've said that before. I have no real opinion of it, but I know that it's one of those things when the Emmys come around every year, people are like, we like Modern Family, it's a good show, but it's not the best of the year, and people kind of roll their eyes when it's nominated every year again and again.
So how do you feel about Game of Thrones winning Best Drama Series? I know you haven't really watched it, but does it feel like...
No, I haven't watched it.
There's a part of me that felt like this is kind of like the Avengers winning Best Picture at the Oscars, because it's such a popular show, and it's good, but it's not really... Like, well, if this were the Oscars, it's not the kind of show that would ever get nominated.
The other argument I've also heard is that this was maybe not the weakest year of Game of Thrones, but definitely it's not its best entire season. I don't know what that would be. Maybe the fourth season. Everybody really liked the
3 or
fourth
4.
season, it seemed like. But this year, the people had a lot of problems with some of the storytelling choices and the way that they dealt with sexual assault, especially. And so it was interesting that despite the backlash, and just because of how popular it is, and I guess, I mean, I'm assuming it's creative and it's well done, and people like it. I saw a couple people on Twitter kind of being sarcastic and kind of rolling their collective eyes about the win for writing for a drama series, because it definitely should not have beaten some of the other things. Like, I think Better Call Saul was in there.
I think Better
and
Call
there was some
Saul
other things that
didn't get the recognition it may have deserved because it was so new still.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Emmys are kind of averse to giving that award to a brand new show that is like seen as a spin-off. But I felt like that and Mad Men were the best two in that category. That, you know,
yeah.
Whatever happens. So there was a new award this year. This variety
just
sketch
one or
series.
yeah, the one that Inside Amy Schumer won, variety sketch series. But what were the nominees for that? So it was Inside Amy Schumer.
Well, this is what I think is interesting: is this variety sketch series award gave a show like Drunk History a chance to be nominated for an Emmy, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it was Inside Amy Schumer, Drunk History, Key and Peele, Portlandia, and Saturday Night Live, which I guess is just a... Here you go, Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Here's another nomination. So that was interesting. Have you watched all of those? I feel like I've seen bits and pieces of all of them.
Bits of Key and Peele. I've watched every episode of Portlandia. I love that show. I talked about this last week. It's so funny, and I mean, based on the ones I've seen, I would be in support of something like that winning. I actually have not seen any of... I think I've seen 2 or 3 segments that I just looked up on YouTube from Inside Amy Schumer, and they were funny. But it's interesting this was the very first year for that category, right? The brand new category.
Yeah, brand new.
Yeah.
But a not brand new category was the Variety Talk Series category, and we talked a lot about John Oliver last week.
Yeah. And he did not win.
He did not win, but do you think he should have? Because Jon Stewart, in his last run as Daily Show host, is the show that won Variety Talk Series.
Yeah, and I guess he's won that category several times, is what I think I've heard.
I think he's won it a lot of times, but Colbert Report won the last 2 years, and before that, Daily Show won every year since 2003.
So it was like a farewell award, you know. He's off the air now. I mean, I do think that John Oliver's show should win, or should have won, but you know, it's going to be around, so there's always in the future, I think, plenty of opportunity for it to win and get some recognition.
Stewart's put in his time, I guess. Not like he hasn't won this award before, but
right.
But he's done a very culturally impactful show for a long time.
Yeah.
On a similar note, Jon Hamm finally, after 8 years of getting nominated for playing Don Draper in Mad Men,
finally won leading actor.
He
for
also
Mad Men.
got a farewell nod, and had that just fantastic reaction where he just fell onto the stage.
Yeah.
Didn't bother using the stairs. It was almost like all of the... I don't know how much he thinks about award shows, but there was clearly something that had finally been lifted off of his shoulders for winning for this show.
Yeah.
Because he just looked so, like, overwhelmed, like, not overwhelmed, but, like, just relieved.
Yeah.
Like, he stood up there for a few seconds just like, oh my gosh, finally.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that despite, you know, several years of nominations for other performers on Mad Men, they've never won an acting award until this moment for the history of the show in 8 years. So, which is, you know, I mean, I'm a huge Mad Men fan, so I would have been fine seeing Elizabeth Moss win in any year. But, you know, I'm glad Jon Hamm won. I thought he was great in the final season. And it's just, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't have another chance at this. We got to give it to you now, or, you know.
It's interesting. The theory I keep hearing floated around for why he wasn't winning was because people kind of took one look at him and thought, here's this like
Really good looking person.
really attractive person who like doesn't have that hard of a job acting like an attractive person. Where like if you've watched Mad Men, you probably understand that the work he does is like so subtle and
Yes.
and
Understated.
Yeah, and very like long term. It's not like you can just watch one episode and really understand what he's doing.
Yeah.
And it's just really nice that he got some recognition for that. However much you make of the Emmys.
Yeah, I agree. What so what did you find just the most like annoying or disheartening? What was maybe the least interesting part of the telecast or the awards themselves?
It was similar to the Oscars where there's that middle part of the show where they're giving out sound mixing and sound editing awards, which is nice, but like you just don't really know what's happening.
Right.
And I experienced a similar phenomenon when they were running through the all the mini-series awards in the middle of the show, because I have not watched Olive Kitteridge, and Olive Kitteridge won a million awards.
Of things. Can we talk about, did Margot Martindale really win for like one scene in The Americans? Did she have a single scene in the entire third season?
Certainly the most baffling thing that happened.
And I think we both really love her, and she's great on The Americans. But
no, she's great. But what happened was she did one scene.
One scene in the whole season.
With Frank Langella.
Frank Langella.
At a cafe that was like maybe a minute and a half to 2 minutes
Yeah, it was
long.
Pretty short. It was like one of the opening scenes of an episode.
Nothing of importance even happened in the scene that I can recall. And then she got nominated and won.
For guest actress in a drama. Anyway, Americans is great. She's great. She had a much bigger role in the first two seasons, and then she was busy doing another show on a different network that got canceled. And she had literally one scene, and she got to take home an Emmy for it, which is fine. She's great, but
yeah, the miniseries thing was weird. I don't know if I'm ever gonna watch Olive Kitteridge, but good for them for all their awards. And then, it picked back up at the end. You got into all the stuff that people want to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a decent telecast. Like I wasn't like glued to the screen or anything, but
yeah,
it was interesting. And
the sense that I got from it was that people were glad that it kind of moved along at a clip. There were maybe a few bits that didn't work, but for the most part, the host jokes were pretty funny, and the show just kept moving. And obviously, like we mentioned before, it didn't go over time, so people weren't sitting there at 11:45 going like, "This is way too long," and we're so not interested anymore. Yeah, I mean, the Emmys are always going to be, fairly interested in commercial shows and interested in, what is popular, and here, let's nominate this for the, 10th time. But I thought it was a pretty interesting year in terms of, Amazon Prime shows were nominated. You had some Netflix shows in the mix. It just shows kind of, where we're at right now. There's just such a glut of content, and I think the Emmys are trying to keep up with like, hey, let's nominate this from this and this from this, and oh, this show is popular, and it's just a weird mix of things. And the voting, like, we can't even explain really how the voting process works, because I guess it changed this year. I never understood it to begin with.
I don't care enough to really try to understand how it works either.
Yeah, it's not necessarily something that matters a whole lot.
So there's only one more thing I really wanted to talk about with this. Is the supporting actor in a drama series was pretty interesting category. And I feel like a lot of people, including myself, thought that Jonathan Banks was going to finally win for playing Mike Ehrmantraut, even though it's a new show.
Yeah.
But for his role on Better Call Saul Season 1, particularly the solo Jonathan Banks episode.
Yeah.
That ends with the I don't want to say famous because it's probably in a very small circle of the internet, but the I Broke My Boy scene, that was like very good and very powerful, which I think I rewatched during a commercial break of the Emmys, and then thought, man, he's going to win for that later, and then didn't. Especially in a year that Peter Dinklage is one of my favorite actors and characters on Game of Thrones, but like he didn't really do all that much this year that I thought was noteworthy, especially compared to Jonathan Banks. I kind of thought it was going to be between Banks and Ben Mendelsohn for Bloodline, because whatever misgivings I have about Bloodline, he was certainly
right. Which is what I've heard. I've seen the first few episodes about Bloodline. Haven't finished this season, but basically everyone's reaction that I've heard was basically watch it for Ben Mendelsohn, and this guy is starting to get more work and stuff, and he's just a really interesting actor. Better Call Saul. I really liked the first season. I wouldn't say it's the absolute best thing on television, but in terms of what that spinoff could have been and how potentially terrible it could have been and how great it actually is, like the filmmaking is good, the writing is good, the actors are good, like it's a totally different show from Breaking Bad, and I feel like there's this narrative brewing that the first season was somehow a disappointment because it wasn't as necessarily as there wasn't as much action or plot twists or any crazy things that were happening. I thought it was very interesting how character driven it was, and I thought that Jonathan Banks episode 5-0 of Better Call Saul was one of the best episodes of TV I think I watched in the spring. So that would have been great to see him win. I mean, he's clearly still on Better Call Saul, and they have another season coming, and hopefully there'll be more opportunities for him to do some really interesting things and potentially win in the future. But it is funny that he was nominated for Breaking Bad. He was always great on Breaking Bad. Never won for Breaking Bad, and then... Or did he ever win for Breaking Bad? I don't think he did.
No, he didn't.
And then gets another chance to play the same role in a different show, gets nominated, really deserves it, and still doesn't win. So that is interesting. But anything else?
I won't sidetrack us with Better Call Saul, but obviously we haven't talked about that show on the podcast. That is one of my favorite things that I've watched this year, probably. I just love the way that Vince Gilligan and company come up with a really powerful visual palette for these shows that are in places that are not actually visually interesting in real life. It's pretty awesome. The Cinnabon scene alone that opened the series is just one of the most beautiful cinematic things on TV the whole year.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a show that people should check out.
And definitely give it a chance. It's only 10 episodes, but it requires a little bit of patience just because it's not like Breaking Bad. They don't throw you into a bunch of action, but it's really well written. The actors are fantastic on it. It's funny moments. Sorry, were you going to say something else about it? Or?
I was going to do a shameless plug. I was going to say it's definitely a show you should check out, which is a theme of my new column on GainesvilleScene.com.
Absolutely. GainesvilleScene.com.
It's called Hidden in Plain View, and the idea is every other Monday, I believe, I'm going to fill people in on shows that they probably haven't been watching and that they should check out.
Shows that are getting lost in the shuffle with all the stuff that's being talked about.
Obviously, that's where the idea came from, was, over more than 400 scripted shows, and what are you missing out on? So... I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but the first piece that went up today, we're recording this on a Monday, or a Tuesday.
Yeah, it's Tuesday.
I don't know what day it is.
It went up yesterday or today?
I guess Tuesdays will be the day it comes up.
And it's going to be bi-weekly?
Bi-weekly.
Okay.
And the first piece is about Mr. Robot, which we have talked about on this podcast, but it's spoiler-free if you want to go read it. And hopefully it'll convince you to check it out. And that'll be the idea behind the whole column. So there's my shameless plug.
Well, yeah, definitely. I'll post a link when I post this episode on the blog. I'll post a link to it. Anything else we want to cover today?
I suppose I wanted to ask you, because this is something that you're really interested in that I know almost nothing about, which is this whole Broadway world. And I don't know how many listeners, whatever listeners we do have, are going to cross over into this section of the audience. But this new cast album, and just let me say this because I don't know if it's going to sound wrong, but it'll be funnier if it is. This new cast album for Hamilton came out, which is a show, and you have told me that it is pretty great. Tell me as a normal person who, well, I don't want to say that people who like Broadway shows are not normal people. Let me say, as someone who doesn't really know anything about Broadway shows other than, the big stuff, why is this great? Why should I be interested in this?
Yesterday was a big day. Since February, there's this musical. It's called Hamilton. It's written by a composer and lyricist, Lin-Manuel Miranda. He had a musical in 2008 that was pretty popular, won a bunch of Tony Awards, called In the Heights. And with that show, he sort of infused like a hip-hop and contemporary sound into musical theater that I think people thought was really fresh and interesting. And I guess he found this biography of Alexander Hamilton written by Ron Chernow, and it's like over 800 pages, and he started reading it and he thought, this is my next project. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a musical of this. And his thing is he's really good at putting contemporary music, especially rap and hip-hop, into musical theater storytelling. So this show opened off-Broadway at the Public Theater in New York, I think in February, and of course it was a smash hit, rave reviews, and it opened on Broadway in the summer. They shut it down for a couple weeks, reworked some things, and opened it on Broadway over the summer. This summer. So like it just opened in August. Well, it was in previews like in July, and then it had its official opening in August. Rave reviews again. Everyone's wondering when the album's coming out. Well, the digital release of the album was going to be Friday, the 25th, which is 4 days from now. But NPR, in all its glory, they have on NPR Music, they have a section where they do first listens of new albums and stuff. And surprise, Monday morning, they pulled a Beyonce and dropped the whole album for people to listen to for free on NPR.
So it's been about 24 hours.
So it's been 24 hours.
Since it came out. How many times have you listened to it?
I've listened to it once all the way through and then gone back to certain bits. But
so what is it?
I have
to
just say,
show?
No, I haven't seen the show because I haven't been to New York this year. And the tickets, because it's so popular, it's a Book of Mormon situation. It's selling out. People are scalping tickets for $300 to $500. It's hard to get a ticket.
So what is it that resonates with you? What is it?
I'm blown away by this. Like, I was trying to describe it to someone yesterday. There are moments where, because you're just listening to it, it's a little tricky to understand exactly what's happening, but you can infer things and you can figure things out because, I mean, spoiler alert, it's history. So people die, people get sick, people get shot. There's, these political debates. It's basically the story of Alexander Hamilton, how he immigrated to this country, how he was extremely poor and basically wrote his way into basically power. He was George Washington's right-hand man. He created our monetary system, and it basically highlights him and shows his impact in American history.
See, to me, that doesn't sound like something that could be made into a great musical.
No, it doesn't sound like you're like, why would I want to care? But it's astonishing. The music is so catchy. It's so good. The lyrics they're dense, they're smart, they're funny. They give you so much information packed into these songs, and there's just a couple of songs that just really blew me away that I was like, this should be on the radio. The song is so good. And there's a couple of moments where even though I wasn't watching it, I was just like, wow, this is really powerful. I can only imagine what this would be like on stage. I have no idea if or when I'll get to see the show, but I highly recommend listening to this album. It's worth your time. I think you can go, look at sort of the basic plot points of history and figure out the stuff that doesn't quite make sense just from listening to it.
How long does it run?
The album?
Yeah.
It's like there's so much music that it's basically split into, they have like a disc for Act 1 and a disc for Act 2, and each one is about 70 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot to listen to, there's a lot to unpack, but it's very refreshing. I listen to a lot of musicals, I'm very familiar with a lot of musicals, and I don't think I've ever listened to anything so... I mean, I don't want to say innovative, because obviously Lin-Manuel Miranda, the composer, has included hip-hop into other projects of his, but...
And it's impactful emotionally as well?
It is, because there's things that happen in his life, in Alexander Hamilton's life, that are very emotional, but the way that they're presented really hits home. There's also just a lot of really interesting things about where we are now as a country, and it just kind of like... Some of it's just a gut punch, because it's basically telling the story of the Founding Fathers and how they, the things that they went through and the things that they were debating to build our nation. And there's this one beautiful song where Aaron Burr, who, spoiler alert, killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel.
History alert.
Yeah, this is history. This is hundreds of years old. Basically, Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton are singing to their children about how they want to build a nation strong enough that they can pass it on. And when you sit and you think about, where we are as a nation now, and think about, how it all started, it's very powerful. It's very, I was taken aback by some of it. It's one of those things that for some people, it's maybe just wildly overhyped. I haven't seen the show, but just based on the album, I mean, I sat and I listened to it, put my headphones on, and I listened to the entire thing from beginning to end, and just kind of soaked it all in, and I was just blown away. I was blown away.
Yeah, so
I highly recommend it.
So check that out. Hopefully we'll be back next week talking about there's a lot of stuff that debuts this week. Maybe we'll talk about the Muppets. Are you going to watch the Muppets?
No, I'm kind of out on the Muppets now, I think. Maybe I'll watch it, but...
there's just so much new network stuff, and it's all supposed to be direct, so I don't know...
Yeah, I don't know if I want to spend a lot of time on the network stuff. Maybe. We'll see.
Maybe we
could watch just a really terrible show for fun, and then just talk about how bad it is.
We should pick a show to watch. I missed last night's Gotham premiere. I'm pretty torn up over it.
I read a couple reviews of that this morning, and I was just like, oh, thank God I bailed on that show.
No, don't remind me. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully we'll be back and talk about some more stuff, and hopefully we'll have stuff for you to. I'll have stuff for you to read too. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Definitely check out Taylor's column. So this one happened this week. So in another 2 weeks, there'll be a new one up, and it'll be about something that you may or may not be watching. Probably something a little more obscure or a little less popular. I think that'll do it for this week. Yeah, we'll find out. We'll come up with something interesting to do next week. Maybe we'll cover like one or two network shows and just see where we stand on them. Probably we're not going to speak very highly of them. So if you don't want to hear a whole episode of us just like bashing, I don't know. Apparently this Muppet show has got a lot of problems. So I'm kind of curious to see for myself what people are griping about. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. 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 And we'll see you next